Good morning, St. Mary's. We are just going to do a quick video on one of the parishioners asked a question for maybe a friend or family member, and I think it just pertains to everybody. So I appreciate you asking or reaching out. I think that this is kind of a common thing. So people who have been away from God for so long, some people have just resigned themselves to just thinking, okay, well, all hope is lost, which for me is like mind blowing. Just kind of looking into everything that I have read or heard about, or the 10 years of just digging into this stuff, that really it's pretty amazing. Like the only time that the door shuts to God's mercy is when we stop opening it, or when we stop asking God. God never tires of forgiving us, but we get tired of asking for forgiveness. is kind of how the phrase goes. So, so the person reached out, and they just had a friend or a loved one who felt that they were beyond the point of forgiveness. So they felt like in their life they just caused so much evil, that they know their destination. And for me, like, wow, that is just like, shocking. I can't imagine living like that, just because every day you wake up and it's just like, okay, I don't believe that there's going to be, some sort of an ending or any kind of a better experience, than the one we're living in. But the reality is, I think there's a couple things that I'd like to mention. So this is the adoration book. We're going to make one for confession. I just whipped one up. And I typed it out, and it'll basically just talk about, the last part will have an examination of conscience, so just what the different sins are. But it also talks about what sin is, right? And so how do we view sin? And it's really hard to understand the value of confession, or it's really hard to get ourselves to go, or recognize the value of it if we don't see what sin is and the cost of it. So I kind of wrote up a booklet that just talks about that reality, and it just kind of shows us, okay, the gravity is way more than you or I originally thought. And you can look at the crucifixion. So the way to pay for sin, and even if there was only one sin that was committed, the result would have to be the same, right? God would have to shed his blood in order to atone for that single sin. And so basically that goes to show you, okay, so the value of a sin is then much greater than I had originally anticipated. It requires God's life in order to make up for that. So, but it's equally as true that when Jesus died on the cross, that everything was paid for. And so even if you were Hitler, or you had committed that kind of a crime, Saint Catherine of Siena, it was revealed to her in her dialogues. It's called. She has this book called the Dialogues, and she kind of just explains. God explains to her, just the different dynamics of the spiritual life, and so super fascinating. But he says at one point that if all the sins of all those who have ever lived had been combined into a single human being, that would just be a drop of vinegar in the ocean of God's mercy. And so, I think a lot of times we tend to blow up our own sinfulness. Hey, let's say you are Hitler. Let's just say you've done that. At the end of the day, it's really us who just had this really intense struggle with God's mercy. And I've noticed in my life, it's not so much about we just don't understand, how can somebody forgive us? How can somebody just offer a clear slate for free? That doesn't make any sense. So it's very difficult because we don't have that experience, right? Typically in our lives, people forgive us, but it's not that radical, just yes, you're just completely forgiven, and I love you, as if that didn't even happen, right? We're not accustomed to that, so it's really hard for us to believe it. But that's where prayer is so important, and just coming to read the saints. And at the beginning, I can tell you this stuff, but it's most likely just going to bounce right off you, right? I mean, our brains understand it, but our hearts don't open at the same capacity. They don't open at the same rate as our brains do. So our hearts take a very long time to understand things. But the more that I've experienced, the more I kind of walk this journey, I start to learn and learn and learn and learn and learn. And over years, my heart starts to open. But it's never just like an instant process. It almost takes years for us to understand things. And so, but the good thing is that there is unbelievable amount of hope for those who desire it, right? So there's always that opportunity to receive mercy and receive grace. And I think Jesus, in this Diary of St. Faustina, I don't have a copy here, but the Diary of St. Faustina, he simply just like lays out all the different benefits of confession and he talks about that. I'll mention a lot of St. Faustina in my book, so I'll talk about that one. And so I'll have it at Mass on not this Sunday, next Sunday. So feel free to grab a copy, and that'll kind of give you a good idea. But yeah, we should never despair. We should never just say no to God's mercy. God only stops giving us mercy when we stop asking for it. But at any point of our lives, we can always return, right? We don't want to wait till the last second, right? Because we don't know if that second's going to be there. Because they used to pray for a not a sudden death. That was always the prayer of the church for thousands of years, because that gives us time to repent and change our lives. Nowadays, we think the opposite, but really, we want to just be prepared every day, like what Jesus says. So those are my thoughts. I think that if you have any questions, please read the book. Like, the book will have everything that you need to know about sin. And some of the stuff is hard, like it's hard to hear. But I would rather know it now than get to the end and my chance to do something about the information that's kind of given to us is gone, right? So my chance to change, my chance to use God's mercy, it has run out of time. So I would hate to be in that boat. So I'm going to tell you the hard stuff now so that you can get it, and then there's beauty there, right? It always costs us, but in a healthy way, like in a good way. So that's all my thoughts on it. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out. And please, if you have any questions, you can send me your question. I can just make a video on it if you're curious about anything that the faith teaches. So, all right, God bless you. Have a great day, and I'll talk to you later. See ya.